Joining me now is former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Newt, great to see you. Thank you for being here. We're going to get into the whole price control business in just a second. I want to first talk about our sitting president of the United States doing the opening act tonight, the indignity of a man who clearly wanted to run for a second term, who was not allowed to run. And now you have people like Senator Chris Coons trying to rewrite the history of what actually happened just a couple of weeks ago. I want to play Senator Coons and get your reaction. Roll tape.
I think President Biden just made one of the most selfless decisions of any elected official I've ever seen in choosing to step aside and let his trusted, valued vice president step forward as our standard bearer for this election. He always wanted to be a transition to the next generation of leadership.
Newt choosing to step aside. I mean, by all accounts, there was no choice made. Will his revisionism stand the test of time?
No, it's silly. Look, the fact is, Joe Biden is not passing the torch. Nancy Pelosi and a bunch of other bosses took the torch out of his hand, told him if he didn't announce he was stepping down, they would throw him out. He accepted grudgingly and I think bitterly that he would face reality, that after the debate that he lost to Trump so badly that there was no support left for him. But this is not a pleasant passing of the torch. This is a bye-bye Joe because it was inconvenient to the Democratic Party to have somebody that they were pretty sure was going to lose. And then, of course, he passed it on to Kamala Harris, the vice president, who was running around talking about that when she's in on day one. Well, this is, I think, day 1,307 of her vice presidency.
That's right.
You know, she can't get away from the fact that it was the Biden-Harris ticket. It was the Biden-Harris plan, that she voted to break the tie in the Senate several times on some of the biggest spending bills. But she would like to, which I think she won't be able to get away with.
But also, what torch is she passing? She's passing over. She's taking a socialist path right now. I mean, that became clear by what we heard on Friday, which was an extraordinary pile-on of socialist ideas, wage and price controls on supposedly only if there is price gouging. Of course, she'll change the rules of what price gouging actually is to effectuate that process of price controls. But price controls on food, on housing, rent control, nationalized rent control, and of course she believes in socialized medicine. So food, rent, and health care will be controlled by the government. Doesn't that make us all wards of the state?
Well, you know, it's almost nutty. I can't. They'd spent the last couple of weeks trying to move her to the center, trying to claim she was not a San Francisco radical, and then she goes out on the Friday before the convention and gives this speech, which is pure big government socialism. Now, at a political level, we run a project called the America's New Majority Project. Our polling indicates that about 16%, 16% of the country favors big government socialism. About 59% favor free market capitalism. And she walks in and says, you know, I'm going to dramatically expand spending when the average American believes that will increase inflation. I'm going to make the government deficit even bigger when the average American wants her to be cutting the size of government. And by the way, I'm going to put a bureaucrat in every grocery store and have a lawyer at every meeting of businesses. And everybody, I think the average American just knows, trying to reinvent Venezuela or the Soviet Union is a really dumb idea and will ruin the country permanently. So I do not understand how she could have made this speech and why her team thought this was a smart idea.
And who is her team? I mean, first of all, you're right. The timing was just extraordinarily bad. She's already trying to explain away things that she said years ago about socializing medicine. Now she's got to, during this week, she has to disavow what she just said on Friday. I mean, it's just extraordinary. But what does that tell you about the team? Clearly, these are not ideas or these are not plans that she invented herself. Who's telling her all this?
Well, I don't know, but when you're a left-wing Democrat and you give a speech that the Washington Post attacks,
Yes.
you've done something wrong. And I think that when the average American looks at what she wants to do, and now you have her on tape. This is not, oh, that was 10 years ago.
Right.
This is last Friday. And I think that speech will be more important in defining her this fall than her acceptance speech on Thursday night, because that speech is so radical and so much big government socialism that if the Trump people just work at it, they're going to make sure that every single American knows the level of government control she stands for and the disaster that would be economically.
Well, you mentioned the Washington Post. There was also the New York Times. Jason Furman, a former Obama advisor, said it was a nutty idea. Even CNN, I saw top CNN economic analysts saying that it was reminiscent of what they had in Venezuela or the old Soviet Union. So I really don't know the timing, as you mentioned, of this thing and the actual substance, such as it is, of a socialist economic plan. Do you think she's going to try to bury it this week, or will she somehow be forced to revive that plan during some speech that she's going to make at the end of the week?
I mean, I think they just gave Donald Trump the debate.
Yeah.
I mean, all Trump has to do is walk into the debate and say, you know, how are you going to do all this? How many bureaucrats are you going to hire?
Yes.
How many government lawsuits are you going to create? And she will never dig her way out of the hole she's created.
And you know what really got under my skin was hearing her use a phrase that I first heard from Newt Gingrich back in 1983, the Opportunity Society. She claims that this huge, tremendous increase in the role of government in our lives, in the food we eat, our housing, and of course our health care, that this is all an opportunity society, which of course you phrased as a conservative opportunity society. Where did she get that phrase?
Well, it works.
I'm sorry.
I mean,
forgive me, Newt. Let me just play it so for those who hadn't heard it. I realize we now have the sound bite. Roll that tape.
Together, we will build what I call an opportunity economy. An opportunity economy. An economy where everyone can compete and have a real chance to succeed.
She mentions opportunity, she mentions competition, and here's from the New York Times, a piece in 1983. It says, Mr. Gingrich is an avid phrase maker, and he has dubbed his vision of the future the conservative opportunity society. So she's not only branching out in terms of her socialist economic policy, but also in terms of what you mentioned 40 years ago.
Well, look, it's language which works. It was language which enabled us to win control for Republicans for the first time in 40 years. I think it's something that Donald Trump believes in deeply. But I would just say to the average American, do you really believe having another bureaucrat go into every grocery store, having the federal government check every price is an opportunity?
Yeah.
I think it's a burden, and I think it's a threat. If they have that much power, we have no freedom left.
Yeah. Very quickly, final point. They're giving me a wrap here, Newt, but she's also learned not only plagiarism from Joe Biden, she learned how to defy the law by Joe Biden. I mean, Joe Biden, on so many occasions, defied the law, most notably with his bailouts, student loan bailouts, which the Supreme Court told him he couldn't do. They're supposed to be the final word on what you can and cannot do if you're in government. He ignored that, continues to this day to change the regulations for student loan bailouts. Do you think that if she wins the presidency and there is not a Democrat majority in the House or the Senate, that she'll find a way of calling it an emergency, coming out with executive orders and changing the regs to do some of these things without Congress?
Well, look, I don't think they have much regard for the rule of law. You saw that with the way that she and her running mate, Governor Walz, handled the riots in Minneapolis in 2020. I mean, the fact is they've consistently favored breaking the law. They've consistently favored putting people back on the street who are criminals. But I think the simpler answer is she's not going to be president. You can't believe these things and think you're going to win a general election. The news media has propped her up. They've given her a good launch. But I was there in 1988 when Dukakis, Governor Dukakis, the Democratic nominee, was 17 points ahead of George H.W. Bush. 17.
Wow.
And he collapsed when people realized how liberal he was. Her speech Friday was the beginning of the end of the Harris campaign.
All right. Good point at which to end this conversation. Newt, great to see you. Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it.